Welcome, welcome, dear all, here with us in the European Parliament, in Brussels, and watching us wherever you are.
This debate is designed to test lead candidates for the European Commission presidency to the full, to see if they're up to one of the most demanding jobs in world politics.
My name is Annelies Beck.
And I am Martin Rzezniczek.
This year's debate is going to be unlike anything that has been tried before.
Annelies and I are not alone. Around the EU this afternoon, here in Brussels and in all 26 other capitals, people are joining us for this debate.
And here they are, behind us. Great to see you all, and we hope you enjoyed the show. And we'll be joined live from some of these locations, so voters can ask their questions directly to our candidates.
Also here in the Parliament, we have a panel of first-time voters who are eagerly waiting for their chance to put their questions to the politicians.
So let's now meet the 5 candidates taking part in the Eurovision Debate 2024.
We have Walter Baier, candidate for the left.
Sandro Gozi for Renew Europe Now. And
Reintke, representing the European Greens.
And Nicolas Schmit, candidate for the Party of European Socialists.
Ursula von der Leyen for the European People's Party. We should also add that 2 of the political groups in the European Parliament dispute the principle of the lead candidate system. Their parties have not put forward an official candidate for the Commission presidency this year, so they are not represented here today.
Now let's look at how it's all going to work.
We are going to cover a wide range of issues, 6 actually in total, with relevance to the upcoming elections.
For each topic, we will be taking questions live from the people joining us remotely and from our first-time voters.
And Annelies and I will also be putting questions we have received from social media and from our EBU member newsrooms. Each candidate will be able to speak for 45 seconds.
And each candidate also has got 3 cards they can play, 3 extra opportunities to react or to put a question to another candidate. They'll have 30 seconds to do so.
In between each topic, the candidates in turn will come over to our spotlight section where they will have a chance to address you, the voters, directly, and then will be interviewed by one of us.
The order in which the candidates answer and the order of the spotlights was set in a random draw last week. Now, I don't know about you, but we're ready to roll. It's time for our first topic, economy and jobs.
The EU is one of the world's great economic powerhouses, but it's been hit hard by COVID and the energy shock following Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. At the same time, Europe's big competitors, the USA and China, have been able to stimulate much faster economic growth. The EU does have plenty of business success stories, and unemployment has generally been falling for a decade. But millions of Europeans are now recognised as living in poverty, and homelessness across the EU has increased substantially.
Okay, let's go for the first question. In the most recent Eurobarometer opinion survey, 2 of the top 3 concerns that the EU citizens want to address in this upcoming election were the fight against poverty and also the creation of new jobs. What will you do to meet these specific concerns? Mr. Schmit, let's start with you.
Well, I think that first, talking about the economy and talking about social is talking about the 2 sides of the same coin. On poverty, I think we have to mobilize. We have an objective of reducing poverty by 15 million. And we have really to give people the right opportunities. Reducing poverty is obviously helping them, but especially giving them good opportunities, job opportunities. And this is fundamental. Now, on the other issue, it is important that people are skilled. I think investing in people is key. because you cannot have an improvement of jobs if people are not skilled, and the job market is changing extremely rapidly. So this together makes a better economy, but also a better living standard.
Thank you, Mr. Schmit. And the same question goes to you, Ms. Reintke.
In order to be economically successful and competitive in the future, we have to break the so-called contradiction between climate and economy. We need to really push for the possibilities there are in green economy, and with the Green Deal we have taken the first steps to make that possible. But in order to now really put the Green Deal into reality, create green jobs, have a strong green industry in Europe, we now need to invest. And the biggest mistake that we could do right now is to fall back into times of austerity. We need to invest into our future. That means a common infrastructure in Europe. That means supporting our companies in the green transformation, and that means indeed creating equal opportunities for everyone on our labour market. This will be good for the climate, but it will also be good for the people in Europe.
Thank you, Ms. Reintke. Just to remind you, the candidates, and everyone else here, and also us who are watching on your devices, each of you were given 3 cards that you can pull up whenever you want to speak. And the first of this afternoon goes to Mr. Baier, please.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think we should be concrete when it comes to poverty. We say that one of the main reasons for poverty is the increase of housing prices and of rents. And we want the European Union to involve in this. We want that the European Union decides on a directive which obliges the member states to put rent caps and to forbid evictions on primary houses. So I would like to talk on these real problems, real life problems in this debate. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Baier.
And with that, we move on to the people following us from outside this building. As we mentioned from the start, this debate is, in this debate, we are being joined by people watching from all over the EU, and some of them will put their question to the candidates directly. Let's go to France first. Colleagues in Paris, the floor is yours.
Hi, I'm Ben Barnier. I'm a foreign editor with France Télévisions, France's public broadcaster, and we are here at the European Experience in Paris, in the French capital. The context here is of the presidential majority lagging behind in the poll behind the national rally due to a lack of popularity for Emmanuel Macron. The institution that represents is on strike due to a reform that will threaten jobs and the independence of this institution. On economics, people feel angry, salaries are capped, prices are through the roof, and there's resentment over prices of electricity in a country that has an expertise over nuclear plants. The economics is the topic here from France, and for that, I'm joined by Mr. Catelin. He's 24, he studied business, lives in the Normandy town of Le Havre. Mr. Catelin, the floor is yours. What's your question?
Bonjour. I'm very happy to be here, so this is my question. What impact do you think enlargement will have on Europe's economy? And do you think the current accession process for new members should be sped up or slow down?
I want to thank you for your question. I'll field it to our candidates immediately. Mr. Gozi, this is for you, a question about the impact of enlargement on Europe's economy and whether the current accession process should be sped up or slowed down. What's your answer?
Listen, it's not us who choose, it's history. And history has recorded that we have conceived the European project for all the people in the continent, not only for the happy few. We were 6 at the beginning because we are the only democracies, the only those who could make this choice. But today, of course, we want to unify the continent. Of course, we want to open the union to our Ukrainian brothers and sisters, for example, and to our friends from Western Balkans. But it's clear that it is impossible to enlarge without reform. Without treaty reform, without budget reform, it is clear that we have to rethink and to increase the budget for the cohesion policy, to increase the budget for the common agricultural policy. It is clear that we have to respond, yes, to history, but our citizens cannot pay the price. So we have to rethink the software of Europe to be able to unify the continent.
Okay, thank you for that answer. Mr. Baier, what's your take on this question?
We don't see the European Union as a closed shop. That's why we are principally in favor of enlargement. At the same time, we think that enlargement should be beneficial to the interests of the working people in the countries who apply for membership and for the working people, particularly for the workers, the nurses, the farmers in the member countries of the European Union. So yes to enlargement, but at the same time enlargement respecting workers' rights, respecting labour rights, respecting democracy and human rights, and for this the European Left Party is available to fight for.
Thank you very much, Mr. Baier.
Thank you, Annelies. Like we said before, you, the European public, have had a significant say in the questions that we're now asking. Final one on this topic comes from social media, from Ernst in Germany, who asks, what about a European pension for people from the private sector, as you can see above us? Mrs. von der Leyen, in recent years, the European Union has introduced a pan-European pension product, but the take-up has been rather limited. What is your answer to Ernst and others on this particular topic?
Well, this proves that we have pension systems in the different member states, which is the core responsibility of the member states. The European Union's core responsibility is not there, but we are supporting a lot. For example, fight against poverty. We have introduced the minimum wage, which is a precondition that work pays off. Or, for example, the work for better housing. We have a Next Generation EU, our investment plan, 81 billion euros for renovation of houses and 21 billion for social housing, a strong pillar of social rights. So for the competitiveness of the European Union, here I think we should look very closely at how to access better capital, so finish and complete the capital market union, and work on skills that are so much needed in the European Union. So Europe can help, even if it's not the core competence.
Mrs. von der Leyen, thank you for your answer.
It's time now to move to our first spotlight interview. We mentioned it before. In this section, a candidate gets to address you, the voters, directly, followed by a one-on-one interview with Martin or with me. And the first candidate to be called into the spotlight is Nicolas Schmit. Mr. Schmit, please join Martin in the spotlight. Nicolas Schmit is 70 years old and comes from Luxembourg. He is fluent in 5 languages, including Luxembourgish. Nico, as he likes to be known, was 17 years old when he first joined the Socialists' Workers' Party. So far, he's campaigned in 60 events across Europe, and his favorite quote is from former European Commission President Jacques Delors.
Mr. Schmit, you have 1 minute to address the public through this camera, the voters, of course. And we will then do a short question and answer section. Please, go ahead.
Thank you. Well, as a lead candidate of the European Social Democrats, what drives me is obviously to improve living conditions and the daily living conditions of European citizens. To the workers who are facing cost of living problems, we need to give them decent wages, good working conditions, what we call quality jobs. To women, we have to make sure that equality is applying in the labour world. We have to make sure that their fundamental rights are respected. To young people, we have to respond to their wish that the green transition is implemented. But also, we have to give them the right prospects, good jobs and not precarious jobs. And all those who need good social services, we have to make sure that Europe delivers on good social services. In this period of big changes, I think people have these concerns. And we as Social Democrats want to deliver on that by a strong Europe. A Europe that enters into people's concerns, that delivers and makes sure that the Europe we want to build is close to citizens.
Thank you, Mr. Schmit, for this address. You have stated your priorities in the minute that was given to you, and you've been in the Commission for the last 5 years. So what have you done to make these priorities actually come true?
Well, there's a lot we have done, I have done. The minimum wage is one of the great achievements, to give people decent wages all over Europe. There is no reason why in some parts of Europe people have very low wages. They cannot make a decent living out of them. There is the protection of special categories of workers, like the platform workers, who have no protection in many countries. We have now adopted a directive on protecting them, but also protecting them against the interference of algorithms. We have created a child guarantee, because unfortunately in Europe we have millions of children who are in poverty, and we need a strong child policy to take children out of poverty.
But parties on the right and on the far right seem to be offer different policies than yours, seem to be on the rise. They seem to be gaining ground. So, haven't you been in Brussels for too long? Haven't you lost touch with the public?
No, I don't think that by achieving what I have just mentioned, which has now to be implemented by member states, that's also an issue. I think we have responded to high expectations from citizens. Never forget, citizens, European citizens, come out of different crises. We had the financial crisis, we had the COVID crisis, we had the Russian war, and now we have to make sure that we put citizens in the heart of our policies and that we assure also better living and better social justice for all.
In order to be able to approve this, you need support in the Parliament. My question goes to the inner workings of the Parliament, which is really important for the upcoming 5-year term. Would you work with European People's Party and support their lead candidate, which is important as well, Ursula von der Leyen, if she cooperates with ECR or ID?
Well, certainly I'm ready to work with all democratic forces, but I do not consider that ECR or ID are democratic forces. And by the way, on all the
Why
issues,
do you think they're not democratic forces?
Because they have a very different vision of Europe.
Well, having a different vision of Europe doesn't mean that they're not democratic.
Well, look just where they are in power. I was yesterday in Sweden. There is an ID party which supports, or even sometimes more than supports, the Swedish government, which is an EPP and liberal government. And what they are doing on fake news, creating farms producing fake news. This is the case, but also in Italy, we see now attacks against women's rights, against the media. So they do not correspond to the fundamental values
Mr. Schmit,
Europe stands for.
What are the red lines for the support of Ursula von der Leyen?
Well, there should be. Our red lines have been clearly exposed. They have been exposed in the Berlin Declaration. They have been exposed in the declaration many other parties have signed. Unfortunately, EPP did not want to sign. And this is no alliance, no arrangement with the extreme right. This is clear, and I would say on such an issue, we need clarity and not ambiguity.
That's what I was trying to get from you, the clarity. Mr. Schmit, thank you so much for your time. Please stay.
Now, the second topic we want to look into is defense and security. These topics have become more concrete and pressing issues for many in the EU and beyond in these last couple of years. Let's take a look.
Russia's invasion of Ukraine in 2022 has brought war once again onto European soil. EU political support for Ukraine has generally been solid, with billions of euros in aid delivered and more promised. But as the fighting drags on, the resolve of those calling for a total Ukrainian victory is being tested. Closer to home, concern over terror attacks continues, with extra security measures in place for both the Olympics in France and the Football Euros in Germany. And nearly a third of Europeans now put defense and security among their top issues for this election.
Defense and security, I think that's clear. Keep people up at night from Madrid to Oslo and from Brussels to Vilnius. And indeed, it is to Vilnius that we turn for our first question on defense and security. Vilnius in Lithuania. The floor is yours.
Sveiki. The floor is yours. Sveiki and hello from Vilnius. My name is Aurimas Piečiukaitis. I'm a journalist from Lithuania National Radio and Television. And here in our headquarters, we are closely following the debate. There is a lot of young people. Standing next to me is Nicolas.
Hello, Brussels.
He's in the 12th grade. He's going to be a first-time voter. So he has a question for the candidates.
So my question would be, how the European Union can enhance the cooperation in the field of defense, make the countries buy defense products together, and make the defense market more integrated?
That's a very clear question. Thank you very much for that. And I'll pass it on to you, Sandro Gozi. What can be done?
Well, 1/3 of citizens in Europe are right, because brutal violence and aggressive empire are back. And because Putin will not stop in Kiev. This is why we must win in Ukraine. And this is why we need a real European power, as our friend for Vilnius asked. Because either you are powerful to sit at the table and to defend your interests, or you find yourself in the menu, decided in Beijing and Washington. And that is not a very nice perspective for us. This is why we want to develop a European defense industry. This is why we call for a 100 billion euro plan to boost defense and European defense with joint bonds. We are very credible. Our leader, Macron, Callas, De Croo, our Commissioner Breton have worked a lot on this. But you know, there is my last point, there is no real security without more culture and education. For every euro that you spend on defense, you must add 1 euro for culture, education and knowledge.
And with that, your time is up. Thank you very much. The same question for you, Ms. Reintke. How can the EU enhance closer cooperation in the field of defense?
I wish I would be standing here and say that we don't have to put this in the center, because we wouldn't have a brutal war in the east of Europe. We wouldn't have an aggressor like Vladimir Putin in the east of Europe. But we are at a turning point for Europe. And the question on whether we are going to work together on defense and security is going to be key for our citizens. And yes, we have to work together when it comes to procurement, when it comes to research of development. And this is not only a question on whether we can defend ourselves. This is also a question of whether we are spending taxpayers' monies efficiently. Because right now, in the European Union, we still have too many only nationally focused projects. So the European Union has to work closer together. We need to have a European fund to spend on defense. But also, let me tell you this, we cannot only end by spending money together, we also finally have to end unanimity in Council when it comes to foreign and security policy. We cannot give people like Viktor Orban a veto right on our security. So let us end unanimity in Council.
Thank you very much. And I quickly want to remind you not to forget your cards. You all have 3 cards left, except for Mr. Baier, who already used one.
And you may use one after this if you want to, whenever you want to, of course. In some EU countries, people as young as 16 or 17 years old will be able to vote for the first time in this upcoming European elections. We have some of those first-time voters here in the audience with us in Brussels. Now, let's go now to Maja and Ola from Poland. They are content creators with significant presence on social media, and they're here. So over to you, Maja and Ola. Please.
Hi. Thank you so much. Since 2022, Europe has sent tens of billions of euros worth of aid to Ukraine, much of it as military assistance, and billions more is promised. At the same time, member states have also increased their spending on their own security system and armaments.
So our question is, should Europe's priority remain training soldiers and purchasing weapons and ammunition for Ukraine? Or is it now time for the EU to focus primarily on arming its own member states? Thank you.
The question is clear. Thank you, Maja and Ola, for this question. And it goes to Nicolas Schmit, please.
Well, you know, I share the view that I would prefer not to invest so much money into defense or in helping the Ukrainians. We haven't chosen the war. We haven't chosen the threats coming from Russia and the fascist regime in Moscow. So it is absolutely important for our security to have a free life, to protect our values, to invest in defense. But that does not mean that we should not invest in our social cohesion, because security is obviously about defense, it's about military, but it's also about internal cohesion. And that goes together. So both have to be possible.
Thank you, Mr. Schmit. The same question, arming Ukraine / arming member states, goes to you, Mrs. von der Leyen.
Yes, I think we need not an either-or, but we need both. Because we have to improve our defence industry. We have to make sure that the fragmentation we have in the European Union stops, that we have common European projects. For example, an air defence shield for all of Europe, like it was proposed by Mitsotakis and Tusk, is a project where all of Europeans could say, yes, we take the money, we invest in that, this protects all of Europe. But of course, first and foremost, we have to stand by Ukraine. Ukraine is fighting a war that is freedom against oppression. That's a war that is democracy against autocracy. Ukraine is fighting for our values and all free nations. So we have to support Ukraine in the first place and, of course, ramp up our own defense at the same time.
Thank you very much. Another card that wants to be played is by Ms. Reintke.
I believe we cannot speak about security without speaking about what I believe is the biggest threat to our security right now, and that is the rise of the far right. We see that there are far-right politicians that want to destabilize this union, that want to take away the fundament of what has built peace, freedom and prosperity in Europe over the last decades. And we see revelations of far-right politicians that are working with Putin, that are working with China, that are trying to undermine our interests. And the biggest security strategy that we need to have is to prevent a shift to the far from happening. We cannot have the extended arms of Vladimir Putin sitting in parliament. We are going to stand up to that. Europe has to resist to this far-right threat.
Thank you, Ms. Reintke. Annelies?
Yes. I want to put this question to you. In a recent speech and interview, President Macron of France spoke of Europe facing existential threats and that, and I quote, civilizations can die. We know from opinion surveys that increasing numbers of Europeans worry about their and their families' future. Now, how seriously do you think Europe is existentially threatened? And what is your message to concerned voters? And I put this question to you, Mr. Baier.
I think the most urgent threat to security is the ecological disaster which we are heading to. And unfortunately, Nicolas, we can spend €1 only once. And now I know that NATO already spends €1.3 trillion on defense. This is 3 times much more than China and Russia combined. European NATO countries spend 2 times more for defense than Russia. And I'm wondering if this is not enough. And that's why I believe we need, for ecological, for political, and also for social reasons, political solutions to the conflicts in which we are in. We need disarmament, we need peace, and we need stability in Europe.
Thank you, Mr. Baier. And Mr. Gozi, I see you put up your card, and Mr. Schmit after that. Mr. Gozi.
Yeah, no, I would like to address myself to Mrs. von der Leyen because we all share the need to strengthen defense. But I have to say that I'm a little bit disappointed with your record in this term because your first speech on European defense came in October 2023. You promised a European sovereignty fund. You come up with a little step and with 1 billion euro, the industry defense program, 1 billion euro, we need 100 more. We don't know whether you are in favor of Eurobond for defense. So how can you ensure that in a new term you would better comply with your words?
Okay, thank you very much. Ms. von der Leyen, you can reply. 30 seconds.
So I think it is absolute paramount indeed to look at the financing of defense. And I've been very clear, I've just proposed a project that we could do as a common European project. And here it is up to us to say, yes, we want to fund it together as Europeans, but then we have to speak about how is the funding. There are 2 options to do that, either national contributions or new own resources for the European level. And I think it is now time to really speak about new own resources for the European level. You cannot give tasks to the European level without funding it. So we should join forces and talk to the member states and be in the parliament strong to say, now let's work on the new own resources for the European level in order to really fund our defence.
Thank you for that. Before I move to you, Mr. Schmit, I just want to check, Mr. Baier, did you mean to pull a card or was it by accident?
Yeah, I did.
You did, okay. So I go first to Mr. Schmit and then I come to you. Mr. Schmit.
Well, I hear all the time these figures, how much we spend and how less the Russians spend. You have to look what happens every night in the sky of Ukraine. Bombing children, bombing hospitals, bombing civil institutions, houses. You have had a good point on housing. They are destroying every day houses in the Ukraine. And if we are not supporting Ukraine boldly, well, we know that the Russians will be directly at our borders. They have transformed their economy into a war economy. Everything goes into defense. Now, on peace, yes, everybody would like to have peace, but on which conditions? On Putin's conditions saying, what is mine is mine and what is yours is negotiable. That's Stalin, and we cannot enter into such a deal.
Time's up, Mr. Schmit. Thank you very much. Mr. Baier.
I want to see a sovereign Ukraine with safe borders. And I want to see a reconstructed Ukraine. And that's why I'm asking you, when will you cancel the debt which is on Ukraine? 100 billion euros for fighting for the values which unite us with them. But then, secondly, and that was the reason why I pressed the button, I'm really amazed by the fact that we are standing here talking about peace and security and nobody even mentions Gaza and Israel. And in Maastricht...
Time's up, Mr. Baier. I'm sorry to say, no one is pulling a card so far.
In Maastricht, I was asking you, and I do it repeatedly, when will the European Union put sanctions on Israel to stop the murdering in Gaza?
Thank you, Mr. Baier. Ms. von der Leyen, I would like to give you a right to reply to that pointed question.
Yes, we all know that it is a dramatic situation in Gaza. We should not forget where it comes from. The 7th of October was the brutal attack of Hamas on innocent people. And this is horrible, and we have to acknowledge it. But I was always clear also with the government in Israel that Israel has the right to defend itself, as laid down in the UN Charter, but it has to do this in line with international and humanitarian law. The situation in Gaza is catastrophic. This is the reason why we have quadrupled our humanitarian aid. This is a reason, actually, to set the record straight, why we have not suspended UNRWA payments, but we have paid the first tranche as it was meant in March, now in May and in September. So to do everything possible to support the people in Gaza, that is our duty as European Union, and then to work for a two-state solution, because this is the only light at the end of the tunnel that Gaza has.
And with that, your time is up. Thank you, Ms. von der Leyen. And over to you, Martin.
Thank you, Annelies. Before we move on, I'd like to do a quick roundup of your cards available. Mr. Baier, you have one remaining card. Mr. Gozi, Ms. Reintke, and Mr. Schmit, you have two remaining. And Mrs. von der Leyen, you have three remaining cards. It is time for our second spotlight section, meaning a direct pitch to voters, followed by one-on-one interview with Annelies. And the next guest is Sandro Gozi. Please walk towards our spotlight podium. Sandro Gozi was born in Italy on March 25, 1968, and now lives in France. He speaks 5 languages and started his political career at 37 years old, working with former Commission President Romano Prodi. He used to be a DJ and has run 37 marathons around the world. His chosen quote comes from the Irish writer George Bernard Shaw.
Well, Mr. Gozi, you know the drill.
Yeah.
You have 1 minute to address the voters, and this is your camera.
A more democratic and powerful Europe is possible. And I would never be here without Europe. The Erasmus changed and opened my mind and my eyes. I'm Italian, and I'm running in France for the European elections. And today we are debating here in Brussels. This is Europe. This is the Europe we want. I always try to make the best of the opportunity that Europe gives to each of us, and also trying to give Europe back something. Today, we are confronted with challenges of the same scale as those of our founding mothers and fathers. So the same vision, the same sense of urgency, that's what we must show. The future generation will judge us on this. So let's not miss the opportunity. This is our time, our chance to save Europe, and this is why I fight for a Europe which multiplies opportunity. I fight for a Europe of concrete solution. I fight for a more democratic Europe, and this is why we must renew Europe now.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Gozi. You are very passionate about Europe. We've just heard you and before as well. But the federalist European project of Renew Europe Now seems to have lost appeal. How come, do you think?
Why do you say so? I mean, I don't see...
If I look at the polls, for example...
Well, you know, I mean, you mentioned that I ran 37 marathons. If you want to start a marathon, you think that you arrive too tired at the end of the marathon, you don't even start.
Yeah.
So I'm not running in the election to read the polls. I understand that these are very interesting for you as a journalist. For me, the opinion polls do not count. Count the votes on the 9th of June.
Okay, that's the only poll that counts, indeed. But do you agree that there are many parties that have a different idea of Europe that have a great appeal?
Yes, and this is why I fight against those, and this is why I don't understand how the European People's Party, and you will ask her, Ursula von der Leyen, is ready to open to the ECR, to Giorgia Meloni, to Eric Zemmour, to Vox.
You don't feel responsible
because they
as
are
Renew?
Absolutely against Europe. They want to dismantle Europe from within, and so you cannot certainly open to that. You must fight against extreme right, and unfortunately in this parliament we got two extreme right, ECR and ID.
Okay, but you don't feel that your party has been in power for quite a while in Europe, has any responsibility in that? Are you going too fast? Is something else wrong?
Well, I mean, we have created a new group and a new political alliance in 2019, which is called Renew Europe. And we have done it joining forces between Democrats, Liberal, Renaissance. We've done it under the leadership of Emmanuel Macron, which until 2017 he wasn't president of the French Republic, and I think that we have started to deeply change Europe. We have proposed a treaty revision. It was Guy Verhofstadt and my work. It's thanks to us that you got the recovery plan. It's thanks to us that there is a defense of rule of law. So certainly I think, but if you ask me if I'm satisfied, no, I'm not.
Okay, you have plans for future reforms, I understand, but in this context, can the Dutch liberals of VVD still be a member of Renew Europe Now? Now they are in government with Geert Wilders' PVV, a radical right party, part of the ID group. What is its place?
First of all, they're not in government, because the government is not made. And
but they have an agreement, and
they say that they're in government. There is no government. There is no prime minister.
On principle.
There is no plan. For me, it's a major mistake. And I would never do so.
And are they still welcome
in Italy, in France, I fight against Matteo Salvini, Giorgia Meloni, Eric Zemmour, and Marine Le Pen. In this parliament, we will say always no to alliance with the extreme right. Be it ECR on the ID, our president of the group, which
You've
is also...
not answered my question. Is VVD
our president
still
of the group
welcome?
already said that we will discuss this on the 10th of June. It will be the first point. And then we will decide. It is not me as the leading candidate who decide. We are a parliamentary group. We decide by majority. Okay. I think it's a major mistake if they do it, but then there is no government in the Netherlands yet.
Okay, thank you very much for this interview, Mr. Gozi.
Thank you very much.
Wait, Mr. Gozi?
Thank you, Annelies. Yes. This is the Eurovision Debate 2024 coming to you live from Brussels with the official lead candidates for the position of European Commission President. No matter where you stand politically, there is one topic that you cannot avoid: climate and environment. And we will not avoid it either. This is our next segment.
With recent deadly floods and wildfires, Europe has been no stranger to the predicted impacts of climate change. The EU response has been its Green Deal, a roadmap of measures designed to ensure climate neutrality by 2050. All across Europe, there are signs of the shift towards renewable energy. But these efforts have also brought tension as farmers and other opponents push back. They argue Brussels is moving too quickly, imposing new environmental rules and form-filling on a still fragile economy.
Well, as we heard in the video, it's not only farmers who have concerns about the way climate policies are being implemented. Many businesses also worry about extra bureaucracy. So the question is, how can the European Union meet its climate goals without damaging economic growth? Ursula von der Leyen, this is your question, please.
We've seen that climate change is a fact, and this is the reason why I put the long-term perspective to have climate neutrality by 2050 in this mandate. Everybody agreed. The member states, the parliament, everyone agreed. So this is cast in law. Now we have built the framework, the legal framework, to get there, the roadmap that is so necessary. And indeed, now we are in a phase where we have to implement it, where we have to make sure, and this is why we have the dialogues with industry and with the farmers, to ask them, what is it what you need to reach climate neutrality? What is it what you need to fulfill the roadmap? And this is something where now in the farmers' dialogue, for example, the answers are very clear from the farmers. They say, we want climate neutrality because we live off nature. We know that we want to get there, but please, we want to move from conditionality to incentives. We want to move from massive reporting to, for example, modern technologies like drones. Let me hit on my button, then I have another 30 seconds.
You want to go?
Yes.
Well, it happened for the first time that you want to prolong your answer. Okay, you have extra seconds. Please go ahead.
Let's go from massive reporting, put that aside, to modern technologies, for example, satellite and drones, to control what is necessary. And the same goes for the industry. We have so many strengths. We are leaders in clean technologies. Now we have to get it on the road, and that is the task of the next mandate.
Thank you very much. You haven't even used your seconds, but a good choice. Mr. Schmit, the same question goes to you. Can the climate goals policies be implemented without damaging the economic growth?
No, I think that the right climate policy can enhance a new type of sustainable growth. But this is not for free. So we have to mobilize in Europe huge resources, huge investments to transform, to decarbonize our industry, our agriculture, our daily lives. And I think this is the issue. How can we mobilize the resources? How can we make climate policy acceptable for everyone, for households, for people, for companies? And I think this is important now, to have a strong social dialogue, to involve social partners, to really show that at the end everybody can be a winner on the right climate policy.
Thank you, Mr. Schmit. Unless someone wants to use their card, we're going to move on. Annelies?
Indeed, because, as you know, we've mentioned it a couple of times now, what's happening here on stage is being followed not only here and in Brussels at large, but in 26 European countries, as I said before. Here they are. Hello, all of you, looking good out there. For the next question on climate and environment, let's hear what Madrid wants to know.
Hola, buenas tardes desde Radio Televisión Española. Good evening from the Spanish public broadcaster RTVE. I'm Igor Gomez. As you can see, there's a large audience here following the debate, and we have a very specific question about this topic. I'm here with Carlota. She's 21 years old. She's from Ourense in Galicia. You're studying political science and international relations, and you have a question on climate change.
Yep. Good afternoon. So my question is, as you properly said, the framework of the Green Deal has already been set up. So what are the next steps to fight against climate change in Europe? What are the specific policies that your party will implement to accelerate the green transition? We know the importance it has on society, industries, and businesses.
Thank you very much, Spain. Yes, a very pointed question, I think, a very urgent question. Terry Reintke, what is your answer?
And very easy to answer in 45 seconds, but I will try. I think the first point, having a green industrial deal. I come from an industrial area in Germany, and I can see what kind of potential the Green Deal has for big companies who are producing different products, who are seeing that there are chances in green technology, in green industry, and we need to follow what we have started and really enable them to put that into practice. The second point that we urgently need is a reform of the EU's agricultural policy, because we see that the farmers cannot live off what they are producing anymore. We need sustainability when it comes to climate, when it comes to the environment, but also when it comes to farmers' incomes, and for that we need to change the way how we distribute subsidies in Europe. And the last point, none of this will be possible, and we all know it, if we are not going to massively invest. We will only make this possible if we invest from a European level to build the infrastructure that we need for this transformation. Okay. But if we do that, I also want to say this continent can be the front runner when it comes to climate neutrality and competitiveness in the future.
Thank you for that. Same question to you, Mr. Gozi. The lady in Spain was asking for specific policies. What do you suggest?
Well, with the Green Deal, we have made the choice of a green and competitive Europe, so there is no space for a green backlash or for green fatigue. Now we must implement all this embracing innovation and technology neutrality, implementing this with more pragmatism and dialogue with youth, with business, with farmers, with citizens. It is not farmers and citizens that must pay for the green transition, so we must create further new owned resources. We have started, but it's not enough. We have to go along this way, and we have to make our single market more sustainable for producer and consumer, to simplify renewable energy projects, to ensure a real right to repair, to ban planned obsolescence and greenwashing. And this is very good, win-win for consumer and for the planet.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gozi. And let me just check, Mr. Baier, you were not planning to use your card, were you?
No, I did not.
Okay. No, just checking, making sure. Martin.
Yes, let's hear it again from those who will have a say, a substantial say, in shaping the continent's future. Jakob is from Denmark. He's a first-time voter. He's 20, and he's with us in the audience. Jakob, please.
God eftermiddag. The past 5 years, the European Parliament has implemented a lot of green and sustainable legislation. But in order to ensure planet for my generation's future, we need to be way better at reusing old material. So my question is, what concrete proposals do you have to ensure a union-wide circular economy? Thank you.
Thank you, Jakob. Mr. Baier, you didn't press the card, but now you have the floor. Please.
Thank you very much. First of all, I think there cannot be any contradiction or paradox between a green economy and an efficient economy. We need the ecological transformation. But in order to make sure the ecological transformation, we need investment. We need a new industrial model. We need a new energy model. We make sure that people can make this transition in social security. Social security, social justice is not a nice to have in this context, and that requires money, 100 billion euro. And with the austerity measures which you introduce with the new regulatory frame on governance, financial governance, we won't have this. And that's why I say the first and most important thing is do away austerity and make place and give space for investment for the ecological transition.
Thank you, Mr. Baier. So we have two cards now. Mr. Reintke was the first. Please.
I would actually like to answer this question because I think it's a fantastic question. When we look at the Green Deal, we cannot stop by saying we need to get climate neutral as Europe. We also need to look at how we can build a circular economy, because the dependencies that we have seen on fossil imports from Russia, we cannot now repeat with, for example, being dependent on raw materials from other autocracies in the world. So how we can better recycle resources has to become a core issue in how we do business in Europe. And for me, a very concrete way of doing this would be to extend the ETS, so the emissions trading system, also to questions of resource use. Europe has shown that this is possible for emissions, and I think it should also be possible for resources.
Thank you very much. We're going to have a chance to talk about it in more detail in the spotlight that is coming up in a few minutes. But Mr. Gozi, you pull up your card.
No, I also think it was an excellent question, and I think that is one of our successes, Renew, because we have made the biggest step to make the single market more sustainable with us, with the Renew Commissioner, Reinders and Simpson, and we have introduced the fight for the right to repair. The right to repair now is a reality. You don't have to change your iPhone or your washing machine after 1 year if you want to repair it. We have finally banned planned obsolescence. And we know that planned obsolescence is the biggest unfair thing that we can do to consumer. This is circular economy. And you see how we can adapt our single market to meet the new needs and to go toward the future.
Thank you, Mr. Gozi. Mrs. Ursula von der Leyen, you played your card, please.
I'm very happy to hear this discussion. Sandro Gozi, I think if you want to be president of the European Commission, you should not single out commissioners. Stand by your college. This is very important. We have been successful because we've seen that last year, for example, for the very first time, we produced more electricity with wind than with dirty gas. We have seen the emission trading system that it was so successful. It is the growth strategy, the European Green Deal, because emissions have gone down by 32%, while the industry, the economy has grown by 67%. So it is a growth strategy that we have. And indeed, Mr. Baier, we do invest massively in the European Green Deal.
Thank you.
If you take Next Generation EU, 40% of the 800 billions go in exactly circular economy, for example, or all the projects of clean technologies.
Thank you. And a quick roundup before we move on. Ms. Reintke, Mr. Gozi, and Mr. Baier have one card left. Mr. Schmit and Mrs. von der Leyen. No. Mr. Schmit, 2. Actually, I'm sorry. Yes. Seeing too much from the sideways. And Mrs. von der Leyen, 1 remaining card. Thank you very much.
Okay, and Martin already referred to our next spotlight guest, if I may call it that. Ready, or you should be getting ready to answer Martin's questions. Terry Reintke. Terry Reintke, who is 37 years old, grew up in Gelsenkirchen, Germany, and now lives in Brussels. As a student, she joined a local youth wing of the German Greens, which kicked off her political career. She's an expert at crosswords, and her selected quote comes from German singer and musician Herbert Grönemeyer.
The same rule applies to you, Ms. Reintke. You can address the audience and your potential voters through the camera right here. We have 1 minute, and then I'll have a few more questions to ask. Please go ahead.
Dear fellow Europeans, the European elections that are ahead of us are going to be crucial for the future of this beautiful continent. I myself come from a country where in the 20s and 30s of the last century, conservatives but also liberals underestimated the threat of the far right. I joined politics because I wanted us to make sure that we can never let that happen again. And for that, the European Union is key, because we have managed to build over the last decades a space of freedom, peace and prosperity in Europe. But this is at stake now, because the climate crisis is not waiting. Only together we can tackle the climate crisis, support green industry, create green jobs and create a future for all of us in Europe. Together we can do it. Choose courage. Choose green.
Thank you very much, Ms. Reintke. You want the Green Deal to be even stricter than what has been approved by the Commission. Yet you have seen, and the Member States, of course, but you've seen a huge backlash, we talked about it in the video, from farmers and others. So what do you tell them?
Look, I come from a farmer's family myself. Actually, my father is sitting in the audience. He grew up on a farm, and obviously I see the concerns that people have, and maybe the fear that they have of the future, be it farmers, but also be it people who do not know how they can fund the renovation of their own housing. I think that if we want to make the Green Deal a success, we need to get these people on board, because farmers...
But how do you do that?
You do that by, for example, supporting them in the green transition that they do themselves. One of the most successful projects that we had in Germany was to build small solar panels on balconies. People who have that can see that they're producing their own electricity and that it's not only good for the climate, but it's also good for their pockets. And exactly these small steps we have to take to get all of us on board, because if we don't invest in tackling the climate crisis now, it is going to become much more expensive in the future. So it's from a climate neutrality standpoint, but also from an economic standpoint, smart.
The Greens, and that's probably what your voters want from you, you don't want to compromise too much on issues like environments. But by not doing this, are you not risking to be sidelined?
Well, actually, if you look at what role we have been playing in the European Parliament, but also in a lot of member states where we are in government, we, of course, know that we need to be pragmatic in certain questions. That, for example, when it comes to the expansion of renewable energies, we need to have quicker permitting processes. At the same time, if now we are going to have a situation where we are moving to the right in these European elections, where maybe EPP is going to work together with the ECR, the whole Green Deal is going to be turned around. And that's going to be a disaster for the climate, that's going to be a disaster for nature, for future generations, but also for our economy. So if you want to keep the Green Deal, you have to vote green in these European elections so that we stay on course and that we make Europe climate neutral.
But I suppose it's all about the pace, but how do you convince people that it's in their own interest to move on with this? You've seen farmers, you've seen other people saying, you know, fine, maybe this goal is fine, but we're not ready for that yet. It's too fast.
Concrete policies. I can tell you where we are in government. We have, for example, introduced climate tickets. It is one of the most popular measures that the governments have taken, because people can see that with this ticket they have affordable transport, but they also do something good for the climate. So these kind of policies we have to look at, how we can take people on board. And then I strongly believe, look at what is happening in Saarland. Look at what is happening in other parts of Europe. Climate change is not something in the future. It's happening now. And we need people to understand that and to be on board tackling this crisis.
If your policies are right, why don't opinion polls show that? Because you seem to be, in the end, losing some members of the European Parliament in the election. I know that the polls will only be here in a couple of weeks, but that's what the polls say now. So I guess your message is not as appealing as you might think.
Well, I'm in an election campaign. I'm fighting for every single vote. And I can only tell you that at the end of the day, what counts is what is going to happen on election day. And we will do everything we can, not only to have the strongest Green Group we ever had in the European Parliament, but also to have a more active role in shaping the next 5 years. I don't have 5-10 years to lose. I need to change policies now, because otherwise it will be too late.
Reintke, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And the next topic, democracy and leadership, relates to questions about how we organize society, our political institutions, about who's in and who's out, and who gets a say and how. So, democracy and leadership.
Last week's assassination attempt on the Slovak Prime Minister was a reminder, if one was needed, of how fragile democracy can be. And as Europeans prepare to cast their votes once again, their democratic institutions are under pressure. Current opinion polls suggest a strong showing for Eurosceptic parties, which could pose big questions for the current structures of the EU once the votes are counted. Meanwhile, European leadership overseas is being tested hard by conflict in the Middle East, a confident and aggressive Beijing, and the possibility of a second Trump presidency.
And democracy and leadership, in Slovakia, these words were particularly poignant after the attack on Slovakia's Prime Minister last week. So, we are happy to have you on board today, dear colleagues in Bratislava, Slovakia. What is your question regarding this topic? The floor is yours.
Hello from Bratislava, from Radio and Television of Slovakia. My name is Klaudia Mikolášová, and I am here with audience in our creative center. It's been a dramatic week, shooting on the Prime Minister Robert Fico. So this is our question by Esther Joba. Esther?
Good afternoon. I have a question for you. How can the European Union adapt to the rising populism and nationalism while maintaining its democratic values, and what actions can be implemented?
Thank you very much, Esther, for that question, and I'll pass it on to Walter Baier.
Yes, first of all, My sympathy and my solidarity to the people of Slovakia. This is a horrible incident. Secondly, there cannot be any compromise with the far right and its agenda. We must prevent these people from coming to power, and that's why I was really shocked, Mrs. von der Leyen, hearing you in Maastricht saying it depends on the outcome of the elections whether you will go in coalition with them or collaborate with them. And at the same, I must say, Mr. Gozi, I'm shocked by that, what I hear from the Netherlands. It cannot be that liberal parties ally with the far right. But secondly, I strongly believe that the core of the problem of the far right is the social question. And unless we give dignified lives, decent housing and secure jobs to the people, we will not be able to defeat the far right in Europe.
Thank you very much. Mr. Gozi, the same question for you. You may want to react also to what Mr. Baier said.
Well, I would say, don't stop me now.
Meaning?
You know the famous song by Queen. Don't stop the EU now. Now it's time for a deep and bold reform. We must revise the treaty. We must revise the treaty to unify the continent. We must revise the treaty because we must be much more effective in protecting the rule of law. Because that's our best answer to the extreme right. We must ensure to our citizens that even if their government violates fundamental rights and rule of law, we stand by the citizens and we stand against that government. And we have also to start to build up this European political space. Today is great. This debate is a transnational debate, but we don't have transnational list. We cannot elect directly the President of the European Union. In 2029, this debate must be with transnational list and with the election of the President of the European Union.
Thank you for that, Mr. Gozi. Ms. Reintke pulled up a card.
I'm sorry to say, Mr. Gozi, but I cannot let you off the hook so easily, because I think that what we have seen in the Netherlands is not only that now there is a potential government, but also already in the election campaign, when VVD was not excluding anymore that they would go into government with Geert Wilders, that the far right went up in the polls. So they have a responsibility for this. And honestly, you cannot just tell us that you are going to solve this after the election. Have an extraordinary group meeting and expel VVD from your group. I know that Renew is committed to the European project, so send a very clear signal now and make reality and say it has consequences when member parties of our group go into coalitions with the far right.
Thank you for that message. Mr. Baier, you pulled up your last card.
Yes. I think, first of all, it's about that what you are doing and not what you are saying. But secondly, the problem actually is we must not include the agenda of the far right in the public discourse. And we will come to this later when talking about migration. To a large extent, the established parties have accepted the arguments of the far right that migration is a problem. But the problem is not migration, the problem is the far right. And we have to defeat the far right, not by including their arguments. We have to counter them.
Okay, Mr. Gozi, you've been singled out, so I'll give you a right of reply. 30 seconds.
My track record is very clear. I stand for migration rights. I stand for LGBTQ rights. I stand to fight the rule of law. I fought for rule of law since I was in government in 2014. I respect the procedure and I respect the election. There is no government in the Netherlands, and now as Renew Europe, we are concentrated on the 9th of June to win this election. And Valérie Ayer, our president of the group, has been very clear on the 10th of June. We will have a clear debate, and we will discuss democratically like any group should do. Certainly, it won't take us years to decide about this, like it took years to the EPP on Orban, like it took years to the Socialist Party
Time is up,
on Robert Fico.
Mr. Gozi, so I have to stop you here. But thank you for that. Let me just tell you that both Ms. Reintke and Mr. Baier have played out all their cards. Mr. Gozi, you are left with 1, Mr. Schmit with 2, and Ms. von der Leyen with 1. Martin, over to you.
Thank you, Annelies. Democracy and leadership, something really important for the future of this continent. And for the future of this continent, youth is even more important. So let's talk to one of their representatives here. Ioannis from Cyprus. He's another first-time voter on our panel. He's 18, currently doing his mandatory military service, of course not now, and he is with us here in the European Parliament. Ioannis, please, go ahead.
Kalispera, good evening. We are going through a period characterized by great challenges with wars, geopolitical tension and economic crisis, combined with intensifying inequality, waves of migration, rise of the far right, as mentioned before, and of course, the climate crisis. So my question is, are the current institutions of the EU able to deal with such a complex mix of challenges?
Thank you, Ioannis. Thank you. And this question goes to Mrs. Reintke.
Kalispera, thank you very much for the question. I think that if we want to build a European Union that is fit for the 21st century with the challenges that you have rightfully named, we have to improve the way that we are deciding on things in the European Union. The pressure has increased on being fast, on being ready to act, and for that we need to have a stronger European Parliament. We need to have own resources, because it is absolutely true. We get more and more tasks on the European level, but we do not have the funds to actually put things in place. And lastly, I also believe, especially, and I'm hoping that very soon we are going to have another round of enlargement. We see people in Georgia fighting for being part of the European Union against water cannons, but this will only work if we have a European Union that is smoother in taking decisions. For that, we need to end unanimity. We need to strengthen the European Parliament and have an institutional reform to make the European Union fit for the next decades and centuries.
Thank you, Terry Reintke. And the same question on EU ability to deal with the mixture of challenges. Mr. Schmit, please.
Well, I think that Europe is built on democracy. Without democracy, there is not a real European Union. And that's why we need clarity on that. And I ask Mrs. von der Leyen, please bring clarity. You have mentioned 3 red lines. The first was about the pro-Europe. I wonder what is pro-Europe for you, because I heard Mrs. Meloni at this Madrid conference making a speech, and I cannot imagine that her idea of Europe is the same you have. But we need clarity. The same thing applies to pro-rule of law, and this is essential. Without pro-rule of law, there cannot be a union, because we have to trust each other. We have to trust our institutions. And that's why we see that in Hungary and so on, there is no pro-rule law. That's why we have to change Article 7 to be much tougher on those member states who do not respect rule of law.
Mr. Schmit, thank you. It might be quite interesting, because I asked you on the red lines with the same way when we were talking in the spotlight section with no clear answers. So let's see if Mrs. von der Leyen has clear answers to this. Please.
Yes, very clear answers. We just heard very eloquently from all candidates that the European Parliament is being built after the election of the different groups and the formation of the different groups. And therefore, I think it is very important to set a very clear principles. With whom do we want to work? With members of the European Parliament that are not only one thing, but have 3 criteria. The first is pro-Europe, the second is pro-Ukraine, that is anti-Putin, and the third is indeed pro-rule of law. And if you look at, for example, Rassemblement National, or AfD in Germany, or if you look at Возрождение, or Konfederacja in Poland, all these may have different names and different principles, but they have one thing in common. They are friends of Putin, and they want to destroy our Europe, and we will not allow this to happen.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Let's widen the scope again and bring in some of our friends in the 26 other cities that are accompanying this debate from afar. In Berlin, for example, we have people gathered to follow the debate that is taking place on this stage. Let's hear them ask their question. Go ahead, Berlin.
Schönen guten Tag aus Berlin in Deutschland. My name is Ines Arland. I'm working for Phoenix today. It's an important day today. That's Constitution Day. The Grundgesetz turns 75. This is special for us, and we have a lot of people here around to watch the party, and we have, this is all about democracy, also a first-time voter. We have Paul Peissert with me. Paul, you have a question to the panel.
Of course I do.
talking about leadership and democracy in the EU, how are you going to make sure that all countries who are part of the Union are being carried along when it comes to new pacts and regulations? Attempts to have common policies on controversial topics like asylum policy have miserably failed in the past. So what needs to be done to make sure countries implement policies that have been agreed on by the majority, even if they individually might have campaigned heavily against it?
Thank you very much for that question, dear Berlin. So, actually, Ms. von der Leyen, this is a question for you to answer.
Yes, we have means and possibilities in the European Union to make sure that what is agreed at the European level is implemented. For example, the infringement procedures. And these are binding. Or we have the conditionality mechanism if, for example, a member state does not abide to the rule of law. You might recall that we had to be very tough on Poland and held back 135 billion euros because the former government did systematically destroy the rule of law in Poland. With the view on Hungary, we have the same situation, that there are steps that Hungary has to do to reinstall the rule of law. If not, the money stays frozen. So we have the means, and these are binding means that we can apply. But of course we want the countries to come back to a better path. So if there's a change to the positive side, then we can release the money. But the European Union has the means to make sure that the law is implemented.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for this section on democracy and leadership. And Mrs. von der Leyen, please join Annelies in the spotlight section across the stage. Ursula von der Leyen is the current president of the European Commission. She was born in 1958 here in Brussels and entered local politics in the 1990s in Germany. She speaks 3 European languages. A fun fact is that, for a TV show at least, she was once rescued from a dustbin by the actor Hugh Jackman. Her favorite quote is from a US Supreme Court Justice, Ruth Ginsburg.
Welcome, Ms. von der Leyen. As with the others, you have 1 minute to address the voters in that camera.
So, hello. Campaigning for being president of the European Commission for a second mandate is one of the best things that ever happened to me in my life. I've been now in 11 different member states, and of course in the next 2 weeks more to come. And I meet people from all walks of life, all generations. The most fascinating are the young people because they are the strongest supporter of Europe. And when I ask people what is it what you expect from Europe, the answer is always the same. They want a strong Europe. They want a Europe that cares, that protects, and that prospers. And I'm ready to build a majority for a strong Europe because the center must hold. I want to stand up with all my experience and all my determination for a strong Europe, for our democracy, for our prosperity, and for our security.
Thank you very much, Ms. von der Leyen. It's interesting to see you were repeatedly asked the same question. Mr. Schmit reminded you of 3 criteria you put forward, being pro-European, pro-rule of law, among others. The question is, does Ms. Meloni, Prime Minister of Italy, and her party meet these criteria, according to you?
So I have been working very well with Giorgia Meloni in the European Council, as I do with all the heads of state and government. This is my task as President of the Commission. Now, the topics we're going to offer, there we're going to see whether those who are pro-European, and she is clearly pro-European, against Putin, she's been very clear on that one, and pro-rule of law, if this holds, and then we offer to work together.
Okay, so then you offer to work together, even if some of your current partners in the Commission say that's a red line, we may not support your candidacy for the European Commission presidency.
We have to build a majority in the European Parliament for all the topics to bring Europe forward, to have a strong Europe. And as we know, the European Parliament is very different from national parliaments. It is not as such that the group votes unanimously, but you have some who vote for the law, some against, some abstain. So it is always that you come with an offer, and this offer is for those who want to bring Europe forward. And this is exactly what I'm planning to do, actually, which I have done this mandate too.
Okay,
because at the very beginning, there was not a clear majority at all.
No.
And for example, if you take the climate law...
But just to make sure that I understand you correctly, you are preparing to work together with the ECR.
That's not what I've said.
I
want to be very clear. This is not what I've said.
Okay.
I'm speaking about members of the European Parliament. I want to see where they group themselves. And then we work with the groups that are clearly pro-European, pro-Ukraine, against Putin, and for the rule of law.
Just to double-check, Ms. Maloney's policies on LGBTQI+, for example, don't bother you?
I have a complete different approach.
Okay, but that's not a red line. That's not
a... I'm not speaking of groups. I'm speaking of parliamentarians. That will go to different groups. And we will see, as we have seen with the discussion of the candidates, that it's not clear how the different groups will be composed and how they will settle themselves. And therefore, you have to choose principles and be very clear on these principles. Let me give an example
very briefly, because I have one more question for you.
I want to give one example for majorities to build. At the very beginning, the climate law was existential for the European Green Deal. The Greens did not vote with us because they wanted more. Okay, that's their decision. But we would not have had a majority if I would not have built a broad majority within the European Parliament. And this is how the Parliament works.
Clearly. Thank you, Mrs. von der Leyen. Last question for you. This week, several European countries recognized the Palestinian state. From the very beginning, after 7th of October, you threw your weight behind Israel really quickly. Looking back, do you think you may have moved too quickly without backing of your European members and partners?
No, I think that it was absolutely necessary to acknowledge the horror that happened on the 7th of October. And this should never happen again. Never ever. But it is true that we have to do everything possible to protect civilian life in Gaza. We have been speaking about it. Everything possible.
You're calling for a ceasefire?
Absolutely. Am I calling for a ceasefire and the release of the 128 hostages that are still in the hands of Hamas? So very clearly, it is true that the European Union has the member states have different objectives in this case, but we're all behind the two-state solution. So let's work for that, because this is the only solution that will bring peace to the region.
Thank you, Mrs. von der Leyen.
Thank you. Before we move on, I saw that Mr. Schmit played his card during the segment, during this particular spotlight. Our rules don't allow for the card to be played now, so please save it we gave it back to you and save it for later. Let's open another big chapter in our debate that the EU and member states have been grappling with recently, and that is migration and borders.
Migrants arriving on Europe's shores have provided some of the defining news images of the past decade. There has been sympathy for those seeking refuge, but also concern about the impact their arrival may have on society. Irregular arrivals, as they're known, make up only a tiny percentage of total migration into the EU. But overall, the demographic makeup of communities throughout Europe is changing. Many voters are looking for political leadership on the issue, and some are turning to anti-immigration politicians for solutions.
After years of wrangling, the Parliament finally passed an overhaul of migration laws last month, but there is still a long way before we actually see individual countries and the Commission putting them into practice. This has become so toxic politically. So is immigration, and maybe following on what Ioannis had to say about the mixture of problems, is migration simply proving to be subject beyond the ability of the EU to regulate? Ms. Reintke.
I think migration is a topic where we can clearly see that having toxic populist debate is not going to help us find solution. We are an aging continent. We will need migration if we want to sustain our hospitals, if we want to be economically successful, but we need to talk about how we can manage migration. We need to create legal pathways, and yes, we need to have a resilient asylum system so that we make sure that the chaos on our external borders ends. But for this, we need to have policies that are both meeting humanitarian standards as well as are implementable in reality. And I think we still have a way to go there as a European Union. But let me finish by saying one thing. Despite our differences, I think one thing has to be clear, that we need to end the dying in the Mediterranean Sea. So let us fight in this legislature to bring across an EU-wide search and rescue mission for the Mediterranean.
Thank you. Mr. Gozi, same question to you. Is European Union able to regulate migration? Yes, this is a question for you, Mr. Gozi.
Well, first of all, let's remain human. When people risk to die at sea, you go and save them. End of the story, without asking about the status. That's what we have to do as Europeans. And I was in government. And I was in government in 2014 during the migratory crisis. And I know better than anyone on stage how the division between Europeans turned the Mediterranean into a cemetery. And I can assure you all that if back then we had the new Asylum and Migration Pact, we and the asylum seekers would have been much better off. But now we have also to open the new chapter, legal economic pathways. We need to work on the economic migration. We need to have European economic quota to satisfy our labour needs and to better cooperate with the country of origin. So yes, Europe can take back control on migration in a human way.
Mr. Gozi, thank you.
And let me remind you that Ms. von der Leyen still has one card, Mr. Schmit too, and Mr. Gozi has one. The other two have played all their cards. Now, the impact of migration is different in every member state of the EU, although many concerns, of course, are shared among them. Now, let's turn to one of the outer borders of the EU, to Greece, and hear what their question is regarding this issue.
Καλησπέρα από Ελλάδα. I am Cleo Nicolaou from the Greek public broadcaster, ERT, and I am here with many young Europeans. Among them is Athina Fatsea, a young European, a translator, and a member of a European think tank that is going to ask the question.
I would like to ask you what concrete step would you propose to take at the EU level to enhance the integration of migrants, fostering social cohesion and minimizing potential tensions in countries that are getaways for migration, like Greece. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that question. And it's yours to answer, Mr. Baier.
Social security, education, integrating people in the working process. But let me answer in a very personal way to this discussion on migration. I never met my grandma because she died in Auschwitz. And she died in Auschwitz because in 1938, the so-called Western democracies failed to open borders for the refugees. Shame on them. And nowadays, the European Union fails to open the border for refugees, abolishes the right to individual examination of asylum applications. And I say this is disgraceful, this is shameful, we should be solidaristic, we should be ready to receive these people in dignity and respect their human rights.
Thank you, Mr. Baier. Concrete measures dealing or aiming at integration and diminishing polarization around this topic. Ms. von der Leyen, what do you suggest?
So, diminishing polarization, we should, after all, these two stories that you were talking about, who is behind it? It's organized crime. It's smugglers and traffickers. And therefore, we have to fulfill our international obligations. Yes, those who need protection and asylum are given protection and asylum. But we are the ones in Europe who decide who comes to the European Union and under what circumstances, and not the smugglers and traffickers. This is paramount. And therefore, we have to be very clear. Those who are here irregularly and are not eligible for asylum have to go back home. But we need legal pathways for safe and secure ways to come to the European Union. And last year, 1 million asylum applications were in the European Union, but 3.7 million migrants came legally to the labour market. Well integrated, that works.
Thank you very much, Ms. von der Leyen. And no one else pulls up a card, so it's over to you, Martin, for the next
Thank you, Annelies. Our next first-time voter is the oldest of our group. He's 31. I hope he doesn't mind us saying that. But it's still the first time he will be going to the EU ballot box. He's a student and a football coach. Patrick from Croatia, please take it away.
Hello. So, as someone diagnosed with chronic disease and I have multiple sclerosis, I'm particularly concerned about individuals who must leave their home due to war or other reasons and also have some serious health conditions. So my question is, what more can be done at the European level to support people with significant physical or mental health needs without placing extra burdens or the health system of individual member states? Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick. Thank you very much. And this question goes to Mr. Schmit, please.
Yes, thank you. I think Europe is a big solidarity project. And solidarity first has to start with those who suffer the most, who are the most vulnerable. And I think we have really to work on people with disability, with health problems. We have to help also in the different countries, these people who are suffering from different health issues or disabilities. But I have to say one word, so I pushed my button here. I agree with smugglers and traffickers, but that's not the whole story. When I look at the situation in Tunisia, and I suppose that you know what's going on in Tunisia, what happens to the refugees who are pushed into the desert, who are really beaten up, some of them killed. This is not Europe. These are not the European values. This is an agreement with, yes, this is an agreement with a very special, nasty dictatorship. So don't tell us it's about fighting smugglers. It's about fighting the refugees which are pushed to the desert, and many of them die. Le Monde has made a very interesting study with many other newspapers. And this is the problem with these agreements, which I do not agree with.
Thank you for your answer. Mr. Gozi, you're playing your card now.
No, but I listened to Nicolas and I fully agree about this bit, about Tunisia. We fully agree, but I would like to understand, Nicolas, where do you stand as socialist? Because, you know, we have voted Asylum and Migration Pact here in this parliament. And two delegations of the big countries who are the most affected by migration, Italian delegation in the Socialist Party and the French delegation in the Socialist Party, voted against. We start to take back control. We provide effective answers to be human, to do what you want to do, and half of your group voted against. So where do you stand in the future? Where do you stand? Would you be in favor? Are you in favor of the Asylum Migration Pact as we are? Or are you against the Asylum Migration Pact like the Partito Democratico, Parti Socialiste and Rafael Guzman?
Mr. Schmit, you've been directly approached, so please reply. And by the way, you've been given your card back because you put it in your previous answer.
I stand with the Migration Pact. It's not the ideal, but it is the beginning of a better European solidarity. Perfect. This is my position, that it could be and should be improved, but always keep in mind our values. If we make concessions on our values, Europe will be weakened.
Thank you very much, Mr. Schmit.
Thank you all. And to conclude, just to note that Mr. Baier, Mr. Gozi and Ms. Reintke have played all their cards, and there's an extra card showing up. You pushed the button. That's what happened. Of course, I'm so sorry.
It's a very important discussion. And we spoke now about the Migration and Asylum Pact. But we should be also clear-eyed about the countries of transit and of origin. And what we do is we invest in these countries. This is the first thing to do, that they have good jobs that are created there and people have an income and can stay. Second, we invest in education. We invest in education so that young people can come on safe and legal pathways to the European Union. And I think this is the way to deal with these countries and not just to exclude them and slam the door.
Thank you very much. And with that, we conclude this part of the discussion. And we move to the last spotlight session. Walter Baier, may I ask you to join Martin in the spotlight? Walter Baier entered the world in 1954 in Vienna, Austria, the same city where he currently lives. He is fluent in German, French and English and started in politics by joining a student union in 1977. His team says he likes chocolate as much as he likes workers' rights. And he chose a quote from a famous Portuguese revolutionary song.
Mr. Baier, I think you know the drill by now. Just to make sure we follow the same structure, you have 1 minute to appeal to your voters with no interruption.
I'm from a Viennese working class family, and I'm proud of that. I grew up in very humble conditions. My parents had to sacrifice even to send me to secondary school. So I know what social inequality look like. And that's why I want to change this. I know that many of you also have difficulties to sustain their lives with high rents, with precarious jobs. We think this is unfair, this is unjust, this is neoliberal capitalism. We want to change this system. We want to put people before profit, put the planet before profit. And if you join this, I call you to vote for the left.
Thank you very much, Mr. Baier, for this direct address. Let me get back to defense, that you seem to have very strong views on. You advocate for a negotiation between Ukraine and Russia. How do you negotiate with someone who is bombarding a neighboring country?
First of all, we are for a ceasefire, and we want that the European Union plays a political role in finding a solution, a diplomatic solution, because I don't see a solution for the conflict taking place on the battlefield.
But do you think that Russia is interested in diplomatic solution?
We must put pressure on Russia. China must put pressure on Russia.
This is happening. The European Union is putting pressure on Russia. Or is it not?
Obviously, the European Union does not take any effort in mediating a political solution, trying to find a diplomatic solution. After 500,000 dead, when will this end? We must put an end to this terrible war in order to create a safe and prosperous Ukraine in the future.
Let me get to another very important point. You oppose NATO expansion. But NATO has been the backbone of European security since the Second World War that you talked about before. Are you really going to deny membership to those countries willing to join?
Every country decides autonomously. My country, Austria, is a neutral country and wants to stay a neutral country. And I believe that security in the future cannot be based on military blocks, but must be based on a collective system of security, on arms reductions, and on measures which reduce the threat of a war happening in Europe.
You also reject the migration pact. So what is your answer to countries like Greece that we heard from, like Italy, like Spain?
Of course, a fair distribution of the incoming migrants. And I'm opposed to the migration pact amongst other reasons, because it is against human rights, but because it allows states who are not ready to receive refugees to pay money for what? I mean, that is, if you allow them to get out of a common solidaristic European solution.
By chipping in, by giving money for the solution.
What is the moral of this? I don't do the right thing, but I give money in order to be allowed not to do the right thing.
But so if you're in favor of door opening to migrants, are you not helping your political rivals?
First of all, that is a human question and not a question of party politics. But secondly, I'm first of all in favor of human rights and of the UN, of the refugee Convention of the United Nations, granting the individual right of every person arriving on European soil that his or her application for asylum is examined individually. And this is not secured through the migration pact.
Of all the candidates that are on stage today, you seem to be disagreeing on many issues and disagreeing the most maybe with everyone. Is there anything that you agree on with others?
Generally, or in the migration issue?
No, I mean generally.
In general, of course, I agree with the idea of transforming the European economy into an ecological economy. Of course, I agree with the idea of spending money for social housing. There is a lot of agreement. The only thing is that there is a difference very often between words and deeds, and that's what we are criticizing.
Mr. Baier, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much.
Please stay here. Mr. Baier, please stay here before we move on.
Pardon?
Time is flying by. I don't know if you have that feeling. We've come to our last topic. Now, you may have noticed, Martin and I are real human journalists. But who's to say that these kinds of debate won't be held by avatars come the next round of elections? All the more reason to discuss innovation and technology.
Social media and the internet, and now artificial intelligence, are revolutionizing our world. But it is a revolution where American software and Chinese hardware are so far proving dominant. The EU has been at the forefront of attempts to regulate with its Digital Services Act and other legislation. But with disinformation from Russia and others on the rise, the risk for Europe is that it continues to play digital catch-up, while the real control, profits and power remain elsewhere.
And here we are again. The idea behind this debate is to bring in as many concerns and questions as possible from across Europe. And across EU countries, our public broadcaster colleagues have helped us make that possible. And there they are. For this section, let's turn to Romania and hear what they would like the candidates to address. Hello, Bucharest. The floor is yours.
Hello, Europe. Hello from Bucharest. I am Ramona Avramescu. We are watching the debate here in our studio at the Romanian television with this young and very Euro enthusiast crowd. With me is Theodor. He's a young computer specialist, and he has a question for the candidates. Theodor, please.
Hello. This is my question. The EU is a front-runner in regulating the AI sector. Do you think that further regulation will help or become a burden for European companies?
Thank you very much for that very clear question. Mr. Schmit, it's all yours.
Yes. First, technology is about growth. Technology is about progress, about economic, but also social progress. And I think we are in a situation where Europe is lagging behind in many areas. And the only solution is to invest more. So it's not austerity policy which helps us. It's really investment policy. It's not pauses in green technologies. It's investing in green technologies. It's about talents. We have a lot of talents. We have to attract talents from all over the world. But also we have to encourage creators, innovators, startups. Because when we have good startups, what happens? And he says it. It's not about regulation. It's about not getting the finance. And that's why we need the right finance. We need this capital market union. I do not quote bankers very often, but there is a banker having said, if you want the Green Deal, you will not get it without the capital market union. If you want technological progress, you will not get it without.
Okay.
So this is the way Europe has to go.
Thank you very much. I remind you that you still have one card left. Ms. von der Leyen, same question for you. It's really about the pros and cons of regulation in terms of innovation and European companies that want to go down that road.
Yes, we have been very careful in our AI Act and in the Data Act, for example, that we enhance growth and all these fantastic ideas and opportunity that, for example, artificial intelligence brings. But it, of course, also has its risks. And therefore, we were the first continent, the first region in the world to regulate this. And take the topic of TikTok, for example. TikTok, we have been, with our Digital Service Act, we have been able to say to TikTok, listen, we're going to investigate in the way you damage the mental health of young people. With TikTok Lite, for example. And the moment this announcement of investigation came, TikTok withdrew TikTok Lite, the app, from the market because they knew what would come. So we have leverage through a legislation that helps people while opening the door to innovation.
Thank you very much. Time's up.
And thank you for bringing the issue of TikTok, which is really important, innovation, technology, young voters. Let's go to Ninette from Belgium. She's 17. There you are, I can see you, yes. She's our youngest first-time voter, I should say. She's a student and a DJ from Antwerp. Ninette, your question, please.
We have seen the rising popularity of TikTok and the concerns about data security and its influence on youth. My question is, what action should the EU be taking to address the potential risks of TikTok while balancing innovation and freedom of expression?
Thank you, Ninette. Thank you for this really important question. Mr. Baier, it goes to you.
I think the EU has taken reasonable measures. For example, the Digital Service Act, which provides safeguards against harmful and bad content. At the same time, you're right, this is also about freedom, and that must not be only banned, that must be publicly controlled. I like also that the European Union takes measures against the big monopolistic companies who control the electronic marketplaces. But please do not forget that these huge companies also have enormous profit through harvesting our data. So I would prefer that information and communication would become a common which would be socially and democratically controlled by the society.
Thank you very much. And the same question from Ninette goes to you, Mr. Gozi.
Well, I mean, I'm a father. I teach to young people. I'm very concerned with the protection of our children. I'm very concerned with the fight to ensure their mental protection online. And I think that, yeah, we agree, this European Commission did an excellent job. Now we got the instrument, we got the mean to ensure a protection. I think that we should introduce a majority online at 15 years old, when you are 15 years old, because we need to accompany our children and to be better and more protected online. And on TikTok, we got the means. If they don't comply, we must go against them. I'm not on TikTok, by the way. And on the influencer, I mean, to the influencer, we must ask the same transparency that we ask to anybody else. I don't want to restrict the freedom of influencers, but they must be transparent. Especially when they are paid by someone, we want to know whether if they say something, it's because they are doing campaign for someone. Full transparency. This is what we did with the new law on political advertising online, by the way.
Thank you, Mr. Gozi.
We've come to the final question on this topic. We see examples almost every day at the moment about the dangers of deep fake technology. What would your Commission do to make sure that Europe's citizens know when they are seeing and hearing a real person and not a very lifelike fraud? And this last question goes to you, Ms. Reintke.
I absolutely think we need more transparency, and we also need to have the platforms take responsibility for this and to take down maybe content if it goes into that direction. The enforcement of the Digital Services Act will be key here. Just having a law on paper is not enough. We need to enforce it. But let me end by saying something very personal, because I know that there are a lot of people in Europe right now who are afraid. I am myself in a relationship with a wonderful French woman as a binational lesbian couple. We see in queer communities, we see amongst black people, amongst migrant communities, amongst poor people that they are afraid of the future and they don't know what is going to come with this election and whether they can still call Europe their home. And I want to be absolutely clear here. Europe is your home. Let us stand together with solidarity. Let us fight for equality and diversity. This continent has thrived on these values.
Thank you.
And we can win these elections with exactly these values.
Thank you, Ms. Reintke. Most of you have played their cards. Mr. Schmit, you have one card left. It's yours to play if you want to.
Yes, on technology, I wanted to say that the world of work is changing fundamentally due to algorithms. This Commission launched the Platform Directive, where there is an important part also on the control by algorithms on workers. And this is a major, major challenge. I fully agree with all the issues about fake news and TikTok and so on. But we have really to have an idea about how the world of work will go in the future. I'm not against artificial intelligence, but it has to be human-centered.
Thank you very much, Mr. Schmit. And with that, we conclude this debate.
Yes, the thank you doesn't go to you, Mr. Schmit, only, but to all of you. And we have come to the end. It's been a real pleasure debating Europe's future with all of you before the election that comes up at a crucial time in our history.
Thank you very much for joining us here in Brussels and across the EU. Thank you to everyone who put in questions from all over Europe, and thank you too to the first voters present here. And last but not least, of course, thank you to the candidates for taking part in this debate.
Voting for the European Parliament takes place between the 6th and the 9th of June. So go out and vote. The future of Europe is in your hands.
And we hope that this debate offered some food for thought, at least. Thank you very much. And from all of us here, goodbye. Bye.